Hello, hello. Good morning, church. Nice uplifting verse to start the day there. Let me get set up here. All right, yeah. Well, it is good to be here with you today, Timberview. It's like Don had mentioned, I'm Zanon Bain. I'm a senior theology major at Whitworth, and I just finished up my collegiate track career over there, and I'm being currently and slowly, very slowly phased in as hopefully the youth pastor here and the youth director. But I am also a football coach, or I just got the football coaching position at Mountainside Middle School just down the road here, so that should be pretty exciting and a new thing to start out on. But I grew up in Pendleton, Oregon, and so I was very familiar with the cowboy way of life, and my grandparents over in Idaho, and I'll tell you a story here in a second, but my grandparents, they had a farm over in Idaho, Indian Valley, and if you've never been to that part of the state, it's absolutely stunning. Their backyard is just a picturesque, beautiful mountainscape, and they had about 1,700 acres out there, and it was just the most fun place to visit as a kid. They had ponds and creeks and this giant rock hill that we like to get stuck at the top of, and my grandpa had to drive the tractor over and lower us down. And there was leeches in the ponds and just all of these really cool things. But one of the coolest things, though, I will say, was they had sheep. They had it was a couple hundred, maybe 300 head of sheep, and then they had probably 40 cows out there-ish. I don't know. I will check when my grandma fact checks me after this. But no, one of the coolest things to watch was my grandpa taking the sheepdogs out and taking and moving all of the sheep in for the night. And if you haven't seen that, YouTube it, watch it. It's mesmerizing. But these are some of the most intelligent and some of the smartest dogs that you will ever see. It was amazing. So my grandma, though, she had two border collies. There was Gracie and Mercy. And my grandma's a God-fearing woman, if you hadn't guessed from the names. But these two dogs were the ones that were used to go get, and they had other dogs too. They had Cotton, who was this huge, disobedient dog. We didn't like her very much. She was mean. But it was so they would take the dogs out pretty much every day, I think, and they would round up the sheep. And so Gracie was the leader. She was so good. I called my grandma last night to make sure I had the names right, and at first I didn't. But Gracie was the one that was the head honcho. She was the perfect sheepdog. And one thing that's really cool about these sheepdogs is when my grandpa or my grandma would give it a command, it was like they were connected. It was, you raise over here and she's already there. And then you do an up, down whistle and she's already doing, and it was like she was reading my grandma's mind. And so one of the coolest things about Gracie, and this is what my grandma kind of gave me a list of like the characteristics of this dog. And she said she never questioned me. She just did it. And it was so fast. They would get it into the pen and call it a day. And she said that she would be so focused on the sheep that she controlled them with their eyes. She didn't have to bark. She didn't have to bite. They just did what she wanted them to do. And so, Gracie was awesome. The last thing I'll say about Gracie is my grandma said there could be 10 people whistling, but she would only listen to my grandma's whistle. This is an insane dog. And but then there was Mercy. And Mercy was the dog that you couldn't run away from because she'd bite you on the butt and leave a little purple mark. Not that I have any firsthand experience with that, but Mercy was, she liked to do things her own way, and that's my grandma's words. But yeah, so she liked to bite. She would get the job done. She wasn't a bad dog, but she wasn't an obedient dog. And excuse me, she just gave me this list. She said she thought she knew better. She was afraid of storms. She bit my sheep. She left emotional sores on these sheep. And so like these sheep, it was a traumatic experience, obviously, to be attacked by a dog. But yeah, so Mercy was, she ended up actually thinking that she knew better than a chain and ended up trying to bite through it, and all of her teeth broke, and so not the smartest dog. But the question that I kind of had with these dogs was, they were both trained, and they were both the same breed, and they both knew the commands, and yet Gracie was the one that actually listened, and Gracie was the one that my grandpa would not get frustrated. It was always so funny because you knew my grandpa was frustrated because after about 3 tries and she doesn't do it, he'd take his hat off and he'd smack his hip and then he'd walk away. Every single time. It was hilarious. And that really only happened with Mercy. But the last thing my grandma had mentioned was that you can't shepherd what runs away. And Mercy, being the aggressor that she was, oftentimes would push the sheep away. She'd distance herself. She wouldn't listen. The farther away she got, the harder it is to get her to come back. And so, yeah, it just made it difficult. It made herding sheep difficult. It made my grandpa difficult to deal with. And it just wasn't fun because she thought that she knew better. And this frustration, and I couldn't help but think that there's probably a lot of correlation between this analogy and this story and then also the way that we are with the Lord, especially for those of us who are leaders or even just practicing obedient Christians. And I think that Jeremiah shares in these frustrations. And as we look to Jeremiah, this is not the first time he has cursed the day he was born. And there is this expectation that Jeremiah has with God. And that's what frustration is. Frustration is an unmet expectation. And so Jeremiah, when we go back to Jeremiah 1 verse 5, which is what I have tattooed on my arm, before you were born, I set you apart. Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. So he's starting with this. Like God has this plan. And so that's where this expectation is that it's going to look like this, and we're going to move this way, and the people are going to repent, and it's going to be great, and the nation will come back to God. But then we get to here, about 20 chapters later, and that is sorely not the case. And so working through it, starting in verse 7, you can follow along if you'd like. But, O Lord, you have deceived me, and I was deceived. You are stronger than I. You have prevailed. And my version's a little bit different than this one, so maybe I got the wording maybe changes, but the message is the same. I have become a laughing stock all the day. Everyone mocks me. For whenever I speak, I cry out, I shout violence and destruction, for the word of the Lord has become for me a reproach and derision all day long. So he's voicing first the frustration, and notice how he's not holding back. He's like, bro, God, what are we doing, man? Please. They don't listen. I'm doing what you told me to do, and it's like what you told me 20 chapters ago, and now it's like I was duped. It's like you got me to sign my life away, and now I have no control over it, and everything sucks, and I want to die, and the only thing is your word is telling these people, and the word that I'm giving is violence and destruction. It's not what they want to hear. And because of that, they denounce me, they hate me, they want me to denounce you. And so this expectation and this frustration is really, it's justified in a lot of ways, because it's like he went and started like 20 home churches, and we've talked about that before, but imagine starting 20 home churches back to back and not one of them was successful. And in fact, it was so unsuccessful that everybody there hates you. That's not an easy thing to deal with there. If I get done here and everyone starts hating me, maybe I don't come back next Sunday, We'll see. But they hate him for his honesty. They hate him for his obedience. They hate him because he's what they're supposed to be doing, but they don't want to do that. And so the question that kind of brought up for me was, and that I was talking with Kenji about, was, do you or have you known anyone or experienced anything where you told the truth so much that people started hating you for it, and that you got in trouble for telling the truth so much? And I could not think of anyone or any specific time where I've heard, and at first when I was reading this, I thought, oh man, I can relate to Jeremiah. And I kind of learned that maybe I can't as deeply as I thought, because he's so obedient that people don't like him. And that's really what we're called to be, but I couldn't think of any. And to further his frustration, it seems like every time he says that God's going to do this to these people, it happens to him. He's going out and it's like saying, hey, you're going to get hit by a car, and then he gets hit by a train. Like, it's like, what are we doing? They're telling him to denounce God. But then as we move forward, we see from verse 9 down, if I say, I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, there is in my heart, as it were, a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I am weary with holding it in, and I cannot. For I hear many whispering, terror is on every side. Denounce him, let us denounce him, say all my close friends, watching for my fall. Perhaps he will be deceived. Then we can overcome him and take our revenge on him. So even though through all of these things, he's like, even if I did denounce you, God, even if I wanted to, I couldn't. Even if I wanted to disobey you, I can't. You are it for me. You are God to me. And that's in some ways convicting, because it feels like every other day there's something that I do that, isn't obedient to God. Or when we look at Jeremiah, there's this contrast I see. This contrast I see between him and what he's dealing with, and then the church. And my question is, like, if the church today, if this is the truth, if we believe in the truth, if we are children of truth, as we like to claim, why aren't we experiencing this? Why don't we really share in Jeremiah's frustration a lot of the time? Church to us is something that's comfortable in a lot of ways. Church to us is something that we come to on Sundays. But, I've found myself at times coming to church and then going home, and it was like I was never even at church. And coming and listening and trying to lead, but then going home like it didn't really happen. And this example really is what Jeremiah is. This example of what a leader is supposed to do, what a prophet is supposed to do. And he goes through all of these, really it looks like a mood swing is what it is. But he's also so honest with God. And even though he's cursing the day that he was born, he's still honoring God in that. Kenji a couple weeks ago mentioned that God is not insecure about your emotions or you. He's not insecure about you. He doesn't have this expectation of you. He knows you. And because he knows you, you would think, and if we believe that, we would actually be honest with him. But there's been a lot of times in my life where I have found myself, I thought I was being honest with God, and I thought I knew what the issue was, but it turns out that I was acting out of entitlement and resentment towards God. And I don't think I was honoring the Lord because I don't think my anger was justified. But yeah, Jeremiah, he went through all this and he still said, Lord, I will obey you and I will do what you want me to do. And in a lot of ways, he is like Gracie, my grandma's dog, because he went where the Lord told him to do. But it didn't mean that Gracie didn't whine. It didn't mean that Gracie didn't complain. Gracie was still a good dog because she obeyed. I mentioned before that a lot of leaders share this frustration because leading is hard. Leading is very hard when the people around you don't really want to be there, and it's hard to get volunteers and people to show up. And as a church, it's just one of those things that's kind of always been around because the church is flawed because there's people in it. But the church is also called to be different than the world. And one thing that's interesting, and you kind of see here, is the people of that time, they were taking their cues from the world. They were taking the cues from out there. And we see this today, especially because what's the number one topic with politics, the number one topic with the worldly culture is, well, it's gender. Okay, so what's the number one thing and topic that the church is going to talk about? Oh, it's gender. Or it's the affirmation or non-affirming churches. And in a lot of ways, it seems like we as a church are taking our cues from the world, and they're telling us how to be the church and what we should be concerned about and what we should be doing. And in the effort to be accommodating in this politically correct world, I think that we have, in many ways, lost the edge, lost the backbone a little bit. And the church has, in many ways, become a laughing stock. And maybe that's a good thing. But then you see the breaks under pressure, and the doctrines start to switch, and the doctrines start to change, and the truth to be a little more washed so it's more digestible. But if we really preach the truth and we're really looking at what's going on here and throughout church history and the rest of the scripture, truth is not something that is to be taken lightly. In fact, truth is the only thing that separates us from death, because truth is that. And so I think that there's a lot of things that we want to be true and that we like to justify to be true, but maybe they aren't as true as we'd like them to be. And it seems like maybe the American church is not as much of a threat as we think it is, and we don't face persecution, and thank God we don't, because it is a blessing. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that I'm not having to hide and smuggle you guys into my house, or I like AC and comfortable chairs, and this is all great, but have we become entitled to think that faith and the relationship with God is something of a scale or a tally mark? Are we trying to just do the good deed and show up so that people will think that we're good, so that maybe the good will outweigh the bad. But the issue with that is, and what we're told so clearly in Scripture, is that no one is good. That God's the only one that is good. And so if you don't really know him, does that make you good? And so in a lot of ways, you see the church start to act like mercy. The one that kind of, we'll get the job done, but I guess, standing on my convictions, maybe we'll throw that one over there for a bit, or, we'll let these people into the church and listen to them and their doctrine, and maybe that'll leave an emotional sore on the sheep. And we need to be held accountable, but it's like, if everyone is doing this, then the issue is that, and then one thing my grandma mentioned was, the only thing that Gracie wanted was a pat on the head and told, good dog, good boy, good girl. Mercy also wanted that, but she wasn't being a good dog or a good girl. So it's like we're being a disobedient dog, but we're still being told, good job. We're still being told, way to go, and you're following the Lord and you're obeying. And I think that maybe we're not pleasing the shepherd as we should. But yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing today. Last week, I went to Cornerstone Community Church. This is the church in Pendleton that I grew up in. And that church, it was an amazing experience. But my pastor that I grew up with, he texted me about 2 months ago, and he said, hey, on August 3rd, would you like to come and preach for me? We would love to see you. And so this church I grew up in, there was people in that church that are like grandparents to me that I had not seen in 5-6 years. There's people in that church that, watched me grow up. And all the seeds, I guess, of my faith were planted there. And the thing is I was giving my testimony to them. And when I first decided, and I was praying about it, that I was going to give my testimony, the first inkling I had, the first, I guess, thing that came to my head was, well, we're not going to tell them everything. Like, I don't want them to know, like, this about me. And maybe with that story, we water it down a little bit so that they know that I wasn't that bad, and I wasn't that addicted, and I wasn't that, wretched or bad. And then I paused, and then I realized that I was acting out of pride because I wanted to go in there and I wanted to be the prodigal son, the kid that came back and everything went right for him. But, that's a lie. That's not true. It's part of it. I got to do a lot of really cool things. I won a lot of awards. But there's been times when, I kind of wanted to curse the day I was born. So I went in there, and as I was praying about it, it became very clear that the Lord was nudging me towards, no, tell him. Tell him the truth. Tell him what really happened. Tell him what happened with your family, what happened with your father, what happened with your mother. They can handle it. And the word that came to me was, I could go in there and I could make myself look really good, and by telling half the truth. Or I could go in there and I could tell the whole truth. People might not like it as much, but seeds might be planted and lives could maybe be changed. And then he also mentioned that my story isn't about me. It's about what he did through me. And so I did. I went and I stood in front of all my family and the entire church, and I told them what a wretched man I am and how good God is. And church, it was the most healing experience I've ever had in my life. Because when I said it and when I told them these things, I had people who raised me come up to me. And I remember specifically this lady, lovely lady, we love this lady, Leslie Carnes. She came up to me and she said, you know, Xanon, as a kid, you had the saddest eyes I've ever seen. I was like, thanks. But then she said, they're not sad anymore, and I see Jesus in your eyes, Xanon. What a compliment. And then I had an 85-year-old man, like John. He came up to me with tears in his eyes, and he said, you know, I was 40 years old before I decided to come back to God. And it is so good to see that you're at terms with yourself. And I said, thank you very much. But I kept having these instances where these people who I had idolized my whole life as perfect Christians, they came up to me and they said, Xanon, I relate to you. And not one time did any of them come up and said, you smoked weed? Okay. And it was amazing. But the only way that was possible was because I told the truth. It's because I was obedient. And this isn't an effort to make myself look better, but it's an effort to show you that this is applicable out there. It's applicable, it happens, it's relatable, it is real. I found that there is life in obedience. There is life in truth. But in order to get there, you have to start by being honest with yourself and honest about where you are with the Lord. So we looked at the impact. Am I breathing? Yeah. Hey, guys. We looked at the impact that a disobedient dog has on livestock and the inconvenience that it is for the shepherd or the farmer. We looked how Gracie wanted nothing other than to hear the words, good dog. We looked at Jeremiah and how the Lord is not insecure about us and how there's nothing we can't come to him with, even if we're saying, I don't want to be alive. I hate this. I am done with life. It's too hard. We can come to him with anything, which is weird because we like to portray him as something that wants to yell at us and condemn us. We looked at how he walked still in obedience, even though he did not want to be there at all. And then I talked about my own experience with this. So, church, this is what I leave you with, and this is what I charge you with this, not just this week, but as soon as you walk out these doors, and maybe even while you're still in them. What is one thing in your life right now that you know you are being disobedient over? And that thing that just popped into your head briefly and then left because you don't want to admit it, grab that and then find someone, one person that you can tell this thing, and they might be able to hold you accountable, and the small change towards the heart of Christ can start. Well, I'll quit.